The average American household spends somewhere between $150 and $300 a year on pest control products. Sprays, foggers, traps, candles, plug-in devices, granules, wristbands, and whatever else happens to be on the shelf that week. That's a conservative estimate, and it doesn't count the $400 to $950 a year that a lot of people pay for professional exterminator visits on top of that. The U.S. pest control industry, all told, pulls in about $29.7 billion a year. And here's the part that should bother you a little. The active ingredients in most of the products you're buying are based on a molecule that comes from a chrysanthemum flower, a molecule that Persian farmers were using as insect powder over 1,000 years ago. The synthetic versions of that molecule cost fractions of a penny per application in raw form. You're paying $8, $12, sometimes $25 a bottle for concentrations so low they'd make a chemist raise an eyebrow. I'm not going to tell you this is some crazy new discovery. It's not. What I'm going to do is walk you through 7 categories of bug products that aren't worth your money, explain exactly what's in them and why they fail, and then show you 5 things your great-grandparents used during the Depression that cost a combined $12 to $15 a year. And in most cases, they work better. I went through the ingredients lists, I went through the studies, and I followed the money. That's all this is. The reason most people have never done the comparison is honestly kind of simple. A $4.50 box of something that lasts a year doesn't generate repeat purchases. A $12.99 can that empties in 3 weeks does. When an entire industry depends on you running out of product and coming back to the same shelf, the incentive structure does not point toward teaching you the cheap way that works longer. Let's start with the ones to avoid. The first category to walk past is the total release fogger, the bug bomb. You know the ones. You set them off in the middle of a room. You leave the house for 4 to 6 hours. And you come back hoping everything's dead. In 2019, researchers at North Carolina State University published a study that should have put these things out of business. They tested 4 major fogger products in cockroach-infested homes and monitored the populations over 4 weeks. The foggers failed to reduce cockroach populations at all. Not a little. Not partially. The populations didn't budge. Meanwhile, the study measured pesticide residue on kitchen surfaces after a single fogger discharge, and found levels averaging 600 times higher than baseline. The insecticide settled heavily on countertops, floors, and cabinet interiors, horizontal surfaces where you prepare food and where kids put their hands, but barely reached the vertical surfaces and crevices where cockroaches actually hide. You're coating your kitchen in pyrethroid residue, and the roaches aren't even exposed to a meaningful dose. A pack of 3 foggers runs about $8 to $12. And the EPA itself warns against using them as a primary method for bed bugs. Save your money on this one. The second category is the aerosol kill-on contact spray, the standard can of bug spray you grab off the shelf. Most of these contain a pyrethroid, usually permethrin or cypermethrin, at concentrations somewhere between 0.1% and 0.5%. The rest of the can is propellant, solvent, and fragrance. Here's the problem. They only kill what you directly hit. There's no colony effect. You spray an ant, that ant dies, and the other 10,000 ants in the wall don't even know it happened. The residue degrades within 48 to 72 hours on most surfaces. And the active ingredient itself, permethrin, costs roughly 2 to 3 cents per application if you bought it in raw concentrate form. You're paying $8 to $15 for a pressurized can that's over 99% not the thing that kills bugs. That's a markup that's hard to justify once you see it laid out. Number 3 is the ultrasonic plug-in pest repeller. These are the little devices you plug into a wall outlet that claim to emit high-frequency sound waves that drive away rodents and insects. In 2001, the Federal Trade Commission issued formal warnings to over 60 manufacturers and retailers of these devices, stating that their advertising claims were not supported by scientific evidence. A Kansas State University study found no sustained repellent effect. The FTC had previously filed complaints noting that any reaction by rodents to ultrasound was temporary at best, because rodents habituate to the sound within days. You're paying $20 to $40 per unit for a product that the federal government has publicly said doesn't work. And yet they're still on the shelf, still selling, still making money. Read the fine print on the packaging sometime. The disclaimers are almost as long as the claims. Number 4. Citronella candles. These are practically a summer tradition at this point. But the science doesn't support the ritual. A field study published in the Journal of the American Mosquito Control Association tested 3% citronella candles against regular candles and found that the citronella version reduced mosquito landing rates by about 42%. That sounds decent, until you realize that a plain candle producing ordinary smoke reduced bites by a similar margin. The citronella oil is volatile. It evaporates quickly in open air, and the concentration produced by a burning candle doesn't create a meaningful protective zone beyond a few feet. You're paying $8 to $15 for a candle that works about as well as any other candle. The smoke is what's doing most of the work, not the citronella. Number 5 is the all-natural essential oil bug spray. I understand the appeal of these. People want something that doesn't sound like it came out of a chemical plant. But a review published in the journal Molecules through the National Institutes of Health found that the effective duration of most essential oil repellents ranges from about 30 minutes to 2 hours. They're volatile compounds. That's what makes them smell strong, and that's also what makes them evaporate fast. A bottle costs $12 to $18, and you'd need to reapply every 30 to 60 minutes to maintain any real protection. Over the course of a summer evening on the porch, you're burning through product at a rate that makes DEET look cheap. They're not useless. They do have some repellent effect in the short term, but the cost per hour of actual protection is genuinely hard to defend. Number 6. Consumer-grade pyrethrin yard barrier granules. These are the bags of granules you spread around your yard perimeter that claim to create a barrier against ticks, ants, and fleas. The consumer versions typically contain pyrethrin at concentrations between 0.1% and 0.25%, which is significantly lower than what professionals use. A single rainstorm washes most of it away. You need to reapply every 2 to 4 weeks, and a bag runs $15 to $25 for coverage that's inconsistent at best. In theory, the chemistry is sound. Pyrethrin does kill insects on contact. In practice, at these concentrations and with this level of environmental exposure, you're paying for a temporary thin film that nature removes on its own schedule. The last category to skip is the insect repellent wristband or patch. These are marketed heavily for kids and outdoor events, and they look convenient. A study out of New Mexico State University tested a range of these wearable repellent products and found that they did not significantly reduce mosquito bites on exposed skin more than a few inches from the band itself. The active repellent compound, usually citronella or geraniol, doesn't create a meaningful zone of protection around your body. It barely covers the surface of the wristband. A pack costs $8 to $12, and the protection radius is roughly the size of the band. That's not pest control. That's a scented bracelet. All right, that's the stuff to walk past. Now let me show you what your grandparents used instead, because most of it costs almost nothing. Most of it has been working for over 100 years, and most of it is probably already in your house. Most of what I'm about to show you was standard practice in American households from roughly the 1880s through the 1950s. These methods were printed in USDA Extension Service pamphlets, taught in home economics classes, and passed down at kitchen tables across the country. They didn't stop working. They just got outmarketed. When the post-war chemical industry took off in the late 1940s and 1950s, the store shelf filled up with branded products, advertising budgets exploded, and the homemade version quietly disappeared from the conversation. That knowledge didn't vanish because it failed. It was replaced because it couldn't be sold at a profit. The first replacement is borax and sugar bait, and this one goes after ants and roaches in a way that the spray can never will. Borax, sodium tetraborate, has been used as a household cleaner and pest deterrent since at least the 1880s. The 20 Mule Team brand has been on American shelves since 1891. Boric acid, its close cousin, was officially registered as a pesticide by the EPA in 1948, but it was in home use long before that. Here's why it works better than a spray. Borax doesn't kill on contact. It takes 24 to 48 hours. That delay is the whole point. Ants and roaches pick up the powder or consume the bait, carry it back to the colony, share it through grooming and feeding, and the entire colony collapses from the inside out. A spray kills one bug. This kills the nest. Mix equal parts borax and plain white sugar, about a tablespoon each. Add just enough warm water to make a thick paste, and put small dabs of it on a piece of cardboard near wherever you've seen activity. Along baseboards, behind the refrigerator, under the sink. A 4-pound box of borax costs about $4.50, and at the rate you use it for pest control, that box will last you a year or more. The commercial bait traps that use this same chemistry in a plastic housing cost around $8 for a 4-pack that lasts maybe 6 weeks. There's something genuinely satisfying about watching this work for the first time. You set the bait in the evening, and by morning, there's a line of ants leading right to it, carrying the mixture back single file. Within 48 hours, the trail goes quiet. The counter stays clean, and you spent about 4 cents. One honest note, Borax should be kept away from pets and small children. It's low toxicity for adult humans in these amounts, but it's not something you want a toddler or a curious dog getting into. Place baits in areas they can't reach. Or use covered bait stations. The second one is diatomaceous earth, and this is one of the most broadly effective pest control substances you can keep in your house. It works on ants, roaches, bedbugs, fleas, earwigs, silverfish, beetles, essentially anything with an exoskeleton that crawls through it. Diatomaceous earth is made of fossilized diatoms, tiny aquatic organisms that lived during the Miocene and Eocene periods, millions of years ago. The particles are microscopically sharp. When an insect walks through diatomaceous earth, the particles scratch and absorb the waxy coating on its exoskeleton, and the insect dies of dehydration. There's no chemical reaction. There's no poison. It's purely mechanical, which means insects can't develop resistance to it the way they've developed resistance to pyrethroids. It's been used to protect stored grain for centuries. Farmers dusted it into grain bins to keep weevils out, long before anyone put a label on a can of bug spray. A 4-pound bag of food-grade diatomaceous earth costs about $10 and lasts 1 to 2 years for household use. Puff a thin layer into cracks, along baseboards, behind outlets, and anywhere you see insect traffic. Here's the one thing people get wrong with this. It has to stay dry. Moisture deactivates it completely. In humid climates or in damp areas like basements, you'll need to reapply after any moisture event. In dry conditions, it works indefinitely. Number 3 is a white vinegar barrier combined with peppermint oil. And this one is specifically effective for ants and spiders. White vinegar at 5% acetic acid disrupts ant pheromone trails, the invisible chemical highways they lay down for other ants to follow. Wipe your baseboards, countertops, and entry points with undiluted white vinegar, and you're essentially erasing the map the ants are using to navigate your kitchen. Add peppermint oil to the equation, and you get an additional repellent effect that's backed by actual research. A USDA Agricultural Research Service study found that peppermint oil caused 89.8% mortality in Argentine ants at 24-hour exposure. Mix about 15 drops of peppermint essential oil into a spray bottle with equal parts water and white vinegar, and spray it along baseboards, door frames, windowsills, and any cracks where you've seen activity. A gallon of white vinegar costs about $2.50. A small bottle of peppermint oil runs about $6 to $8 and lasts months. Total cost for a year of ant and spider deterrent. Somewhere around $3 to $4 if you already have a spray bottle. This used to be common knowledge, and it's not anymore. The fourth replacement is pure boric acid powder, and this is specifically devastating to cockroaches, silverfish, and earwigs. Boric acid was first registered as a pesticide in the United States in 1948, but American households had been using it for decades before that. As of the last count, there are 189 registered pesticide products on the market containing boric acid as an active ingredient. The compound works by disrupting the insect's digestive system when ingested and by damaging the exoskeleton through abrasion. For roaches, you puff a very thin film of boric acid powder into cracks, crevices, behind appliances, inside wall voids if you have access, and along the back edges of cabinets. The key word is thin. If a roach can see a thick pile of powder, it'll walk around it. You want a film so light it's barely visible. The roaches walk through it, groom themselves, ingest the powder, and die within a few days. Sublethal exposure spreads through the colony the same way borax bait does. A bottle of boric acid powder costs about $5 to $7 and lasts 6 months to a year, depending on the size of your home. The commercial roach sprays you'd replace with this cost $8 to $15 per can. Last a few weeks, and don't reach the colony. Same active ingredient logic, completely different delivery method, and about a 30 to 1 cost difference. If you're finding value in this and you like this kind of content, take a second to subscribe. It costs nothing and it genuinely helps the channel keep making these. Now let's keep going, because this last one is probably the most interesting of the 5. The 5th replacement is natural pyrethrin powder, and this one is almost poetic in its irony. Remember when I said that almost every modern bug spray on the market is based on a synthetic pyrethroid? Those synthetic pyrethroids, permethrin, cypermethrin, tetramethrin, are all lab-created versions of a compound called pyrethrin that occurs naturally in the flowers of Chrysanthemum cineraria ifolium. The use of crushed chrysanthemum flowers as insect powder was documented in ancient Persia. Some sources trace it to the 1st century AD. By the 1800s, it was a major commodity in European markets. Sold as Dalmatian insect powder because the flowers were commercially grown along the Dalmatian coast. This is the original bug killer. Every synthetic spray on the shelf today is a chemical descendant of this flower. You can buy pure pyrethrin powder or concentrate derived directly from chrysanthemums, and it works on a broad spectrum of insects: mosquitoes, flies, ants, roaches, fleas, ticks, beetles. It attacks the insect's nervous system on contact. The natural version breaks down quickly in sunlight, which means it doesn't persist in the environment the way synthetic pyrethroids do. That's actually an advantage if you're using it indoors or around food preparation areas. A container of pyrethrin concentrate or dust runs about $8 to $12, and used at proper dilution rates lasts months. You can even grow the chrysanthemums yourself if you've got a garden with decent sun. They're a hardy perennial in zones 5 through 9. Your grandparents may have had these growing along the fence line without you ever knowing why. So let's do the math. The 7 product categories I told you to skip would run you somewhere between $150 and $300 a year, depending on how many you're cycling through and how often you're replacing them. The 5 replacements I just showed you: the borax, the diatomaceous earth, the vinegar and peppermint oil, the boric acid, and the pyrethrin powder, come to somewhere around $12 to $15 a year total. And 3 of them target the colony, not just the individual bug, which means you're solving the problem instead of just managing the symptom. Here's the number that matters: $15 a year versus $300 a year, and the $15 version has been working since before your great-grandparents were born. That's not a small difference. That's an entire economic model built on you not knowing what's already in your cupboard. This isn't secret knowledge. It was printed in government pamphlets. It was taught in classrooms. Depression-era families earning $1,500 a year managed pest problems with these exact methods because they didn't have a choice, and the methods worked because the chemistry is sound. Nobody forgot this by accident. An industry grew up around the idea that you needed a branded product for every problem in your house, and over the course of 2 generations, the kitchen cupboard version just stopped being passed down. That knowledge didn't disappear. It was replaced. One honest note before I close: these methods handle prevention and mild to moderate infestations, and they handle them well. But if you've got a serious structural problem, termites in the framing, a large-scale infestation that's been building for months, anything involving your home's structural integrity, these aren't going to replace professional treatment, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What they will do is keep most common household pests under control for a fraction of what you're spending now, and they'll do it the same way they've been doing it since the 1880s. I don't know what brought you here tonight. Maybe you're tired of buying a new can of something every 3 weeks that doesn't seem to make a difference. Maybe your grandmother kept a box of something under the kitchen sink that you've been trying to remember. Maybe you just pulled up the ingredients list on a $14 can of bug spray, saw that it was 99.5% inert ingredients, and thought there has to be a better way. Doesn't matter. It works either way. $15 a year, 5 methods, and about 140 years of proof that they work. That's the whole thing. That's it for today. I hope you learned something you didn't expect to, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.